Okay. Hey everyone, we are live for the second time in 2 days actually, so super excited to be here. We are live on Facebook Live, we're live on YouTube Live, and yeah, this is part of a new initiative we're doing here at Divi Life, which is Divi Live Quick Tips. And so the goal is short little tutorials or tips, anything related to Divi, web design, anything kind of that surrounds that. And so yesterday we launched our first one, which you can go back and watch on YouTube or on Facebook, or you can go to divilife.com and watch it in the blog. Yesterday we looked at 5 Divi workflow features that you should be using to help you speed up your web design process. And so today, super excited, we're going to be going over how to speed up your Divi website. This question gets asked all the time. It's a super common question, and it's a little bit tricky. And so some of these things might be review for you. You might already know them. Some of them might be new. Or all of them might be new, even better. So if you're watching right now, go ahead and let me know in the comments whether you're watching live or on YouTube. So if you're watching live, just type in live. That'll help me know how many people are here watching. Thank you for saying hi. Hello to you as well. And then if you're watching the replay, go ahead and just type replay into the comments wherever you're watching, YouTube, Facebook, on the divilife.com blog. That'll help me know kind of how many people are watching later as well. And so yeah, I'm going to go ahead and dive in here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So if you're just now joining us, I know it sometimes takes a little bit to get notified about live. So if you're just now joining us, today is the second Divi Live Quick Tip. We started yesterday. Thank you, Keith. Keith is watching live. Glad to have you here. And so yesterday, we talked about 5 Divi workflow features that you should be using. And so today we're going to be talking about how to speed up your Divi website, which is super, super important. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hey, Lee. Hey, Rudolph. Thanks so much for joining. And so if you're watching the replay, go ahead and type replay. For watching live, type live. That'll help me know kind of who's able to watch live and who's watching the replay. And so you should be able to see my screen here. So let me know if you're watching live. Just type yes if you can see my screen. That'll kind of help me know how much of a lag there is. I'm using some new software to power these live sessions. And so, yeah, I'm still kind of getting familiar with everything here. And so the way this is going to work is I have some notes here on the right side. You should be able to see my mouse here. So those notes is going to be the different points. So it's how to speed up your Divi website in 5 steps. And so we're going to be going through one by one the different ways that you can speed up your Divi website. And so to be clear, this is speeding up the front end of your website. And so at the end, though, I am going to talk something to help mention something that's going to help Divi, the visual builder, run smoother. So when you're actually designing and stuff, how to make that run smoother, because that's a common question as well. But the bulk of this is going to be how to speed up your Divi website on the front end, which is most important because that's where your visitors are going to be. That's where potential customers and so forth. And so these are things that are really important if you are building websites for clients. In my opinion, you should work them into your workflow. So every website that you build, you are doing these crucial steps to make sure that your client websites are running as smooth as possible. And then you might just be running your own website, for example, using Divi. Well, even more so, you want to do this so that your website runs as smooth as possible. So how to speed up your website in 5 steps. Very first point on here is use great hosting. I try to make this as big as possible, so hopefully you guys can see it here. But use great hosting. Now, I was very specific in saying great hosting, not good hosting, not good enough hosting. A lot of people want to spend as little money as possible on their hosting, and so they want to get away with spending the least amount to have halfway decent hosting, which I think is the wrong approach. And I'm not saying you need to go out and spend the most money possible, but you need really good hosting. Hosting is like it's the backbone of your website. It's where your website lives. And something that my good friend David Blackman, he's my partner over at WP Gears, where we have our Divi Business Expert course. Something that he says a lot, so I want to give him credit, is if you're serious about your business, you need to be serious about your website hosting. And so I'm going to steal that because it's super, super important comment there. If you're serious about your website or serious about your business, you need to be serious about your hosting. And so if you're doing websites for clients, you need to communicate that to them, convince them to get on, your hosting if you're hosting client websites on a maintenance plan, for example, or convince them to spend a little bit more to get premium hosting. So you might be wondering, okay, well, what is great hosting? And so I have 3 recommendations. This is not an exhaustive list. You might be, wondering why, some other hosting companies aren't on there that, are typically really good. These are just my recommended hosting companies that I personally use and can highly recommend. And so WP Engine being the top, I've been recommending WP Engine for quite a few years now. And so I highly recommend its premium hosting. They basically are kind of the pioneers of quote unquote managed WordPress hosting or premium WordPress hosting. And so in addition to having websites load fast, they have some extra stuff that is built in to help you, some tools, so to speak. So for example, they have server level caching built in. We're going to talk more about that in a second. They have one-click backups built in, one-click staging. They have automatic daily backups built in as well. So there's a lot of different things in there that make it easy, stuff that you might have to add additional plugins to achieve. It's baked right into the hosting, so every time you set up a new site, you don't have to go and set up a backup plugin. It's already done. It happens automatically. You don't have to figure out a way to do staging. It's already done automatically. You don't have to go and configure a caching plugin. You can if you want, but most of the time you don't need to because their server level caching is more than enough. And so that's why I love WP Engine. Now, all the reasons why I love WP Engine is actually why I love Flywheel as well, because they have all of those same features that I just talked about with the backups, the staging, security. I didn't mention security. They have a lot of additional security baked in because they only do WordPress. They have everything configured, all the specs of the servers tailored to WordPress. And so they have brute force attack on the security side. So if someone's hitting your login page, it's going to block them. Trying to hit login over and over again to try to get through your login, it'll automatically block that. So WP Engine and Flywheel have a lot of those same tools built in. Flywheel is less expensive. WP Engine keeps raising their prices, which not super stoked about. So out of those two, if you're wondering which one to try, I would say check out Flywheel first. That'd probably be my recommendation because it's a little bit lower barrier to entry in terms of the price point. And then you can always migrate to WP Engine if you feel the need, which I doubt you will. Flywheel is also now on the Google Cloud platform. And so everything is cloud hosting. So easy scalability. If your website starts getting a ton of traffic, you can scale easily without having to migrate everything to a new server, which is awesome. So, if you're watching live, let me know in the comments if you use WP Engine or Flywheel and what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear it. And the third one on here is my only recommendation for shared hosting. In general, shared hosting is not recommended, especially when you're using a premium theme like Divi, because shared hosting, they basically cram you onto a server with hundreds, sometimes thousands of other websites, and which is not a good thing. And so shared hosting is typically not recommended. SiteGround, in my opinion, is the only shared host that I recommend. I've been testing them out with Divi Life stuff for child theme demos, bug testing sites, and I've been really impressed with SiteGround. They have really fast servers. It's the fastest shared hosting I've experienced, both front end and back end. So when you're actually in there, loading new admin pages, SiteGround loads really quickly, which is impressive for a shared host. So I definitely recommend SiteGround. However, if you can afford getting Flywheel WP Engine, which I consider to be premium hosting, I definitely recommend getting one of those or putting your clients on one of those, because while it is a lot more expensive, you definitely get what you pay for. That's more than worth it, in my opinion. So again, this is not a full and complete exhaustive list. You might be wondering why other premium hosting companies aren't on there, like Liquid Web or Pagely or Pressable. And those are also great hostings from what I hear. I just personally have not used them, so I can't fully recommend them. And these are just kind of the three. You kind of have to limit the list at some point. So use great hosting. This is at the top of the list for making your Divi website load faster, because it's the most important. Again, if you're serious about your business, serious about your website, serious about your clients' websites, you need to be serious about your hosting too. And so Divi is a premium theme, a lot of high-end software that is baked into Divi. and a lot of things happening. It's not a lightweight HTML website. It's WordPress, it's Divi, it's a page builder. There's a lot going on. You need to have it on a good server with a good hosting company. So that is the first recommendation for how to speed up your Divi website. Number 2 on the list is use proper caching. Now, the good thing is if you're using any of the, I should say these top 2 sites or hosting companies, WP Engine or Flywheel, you actually accomplish part of the caching puzzle piece, because WP Engine and Flywheel have server level caching built in. Again, because they specialize in WordPress, they only host WordPress. Everything is tailored to WordPress. Everything is optimized for WordPress. All the server specs is designed to make WordPress websites load as fast as possible in the way that WordPress is built, with the database structure and the WordPress loop and cached visits versus uncached visits and stuff like that. And so WP Engine and Flywheel, they have the server level optimization built in, and then they also have some additional caching built in as well at the server level. No plugins to configure. It's, eliminates one step. However, sometimes you want a little bit more, and so there are some caching plugins that do work with Flywheel and in WP Engine. And so there was one caching plugin. WP Rocket is the only caching plugin that both WP Engine and Flywheel allow installed on their sites. And the reason is because WP Rocket went out of their way to write in, special conditions so that it'll recognize if you're using WP Engine or Flywheel, and it'll turn off certain things that are in WP Rocket that would normally conflict with what WP Engine and what Flywheel have already on with the server level caching. And so WP Rocket is the only ones that is allowed on those platforms. And so DiviLife.com is on a dedicated server with WP Engine, and I'm also running WP Rocket. And so it gives me an extra speed boost and has some things built in that is not part of the WP Engine caching. And so I highly recommend WP Rocket. Now you might be thinking, okay, I'm happy with my hosting. It's not one of the ones that you recommend, Tim. I'm not really looking to make a change right now, but what can I do to speed up my website? And so using a caching plugin, either WP Rocket will work with any hosting company, or Hummingbird by WPMU Dev is also a really good plugin. And so let me just pull that up here. So I have these tabs. I forgot to show them while I was actually talking about them. But yeah, for WP Engine, you go to WPEngine.com. Flywheel, you go to flywheel.com, or I'm sorry, getflywheel.com, or you can Google Flywheel. SiteGround is, of course, siteground.com. And so WP Rocket, here's their homepage. It is a premium plugin. And so if you are, have a website and it's an important website, for your business, you're making money with your business, then you can afford $49 a year for one site, or buy one of the other plans, $250 a year for unlimited websites, which is a great deal if you're a web designer that's building a lot of websites for clients. And then so Hummingbird by WPMU Dev is another outstanding caching plugin. I've used it a little bit, not as much as I've used WP Rocket, and so that's why I have WP Rocket higher up on the list. But I definitely do recommend Hummingbird Pro. The team behind it, WPMU Dev, they've been in the premium WordPress product space longer than anyone. They've been there as long as Elegant Themes has been in business, for example. And so they've been around a long time, have an outstanding team, outstanding support. And so you can't go wrong with Hummingbird Pro and getting the full WPMU Dev membership. And so I know a lot of the guys over at WPMU Dev, it's a great team, so highly recommend all of their products. Okay, so use proper caching is probably the one thing that if your website's running slow and you don't have any type of caching plugin, that's the one thing that can immediately speed up your Divi website. So highly recommend turning on a caching plugin. And one of the ones I recommend here, there's also free plugins in the repository. But with something as important as caching, sometimes it's worth spending a little bit of money so you can get that premium support. So if things aren't, working perfectly, you can have them troubleshoot for you. So that's the benefit of investing in a premium plugin, is you get that premium level support. So top 2, just to review, use great hosting. Most important thing to have a fast website. Secondly is use proper caching. Lee just mentioned in the comments here in the live stream that Lightspeed is a good caching plugin. I have not used it, but Lightspeed is definitely worth checking out as well. And if you can respond, Lee, I'd love to know, is that a free caching plugin that is in the WordPress repository? Well, he answers. We'll go ahead and keep moving on here. So yeah, use proper caching. Super, super important. The next thing on the list is use compressed images. So, and proper image sizing as well. Now, if you are getting images from clients, for example, and they're sending you, even if they're sending you images from their iPhone, chances are they're going to be 3,000 pixels wide or more, and they're giant images. Not only do they not need to be that large in terms of like width and height, but they also have a lot of extra things baked into the image that don't need to be there. And so there's kind of two different things you need to do with image compression and resizing. Is it's compressing the image, which basically makes it smaller without making it look any lower quality, and then actually making it smaller width and height as well. It's kind of confusing, but and so there's a few ways to do that. The first way that I recommend doing is using a plugin called Smush Pro. Again, just like Hummingbird, the caching plugin I mentioned, WP Smush Pro is by WPMU Dev. So again, great team. I install Smush Pro on every single website that I build. There's no reason not to use it because it's going to automatically smush your images. And so I actually have it installed here on this local site. So I'm going to go here, and so you can install it from the WordPress plugin repository and install the light version, and they'll actually let you try the free version for free. And so I'm going to just, I have a membership. Oh, they want you to set, I'm not going to do that right now, but they let you set up a membership trial for free, and so you can try the pro version. But you can basically bulk smush all of the images, and it's doing this, at least with the pro version. I'm not sure about the free version, but with the pro version, it does it on WPMU Dev's servers, and so it's not going to slow down your website in any way. And so it kind of puts that load, the compression load, takes it off of your server, puts it on there. So that's another reason to have the pro version. And so while I was talking, I had the bulk smush, and it went in there and it smushed all the images. And so what that means is it's compressing them and it's stripping out things that you don't need. So for example, when you take a photo, there's metadata in there that most of the time you don't need. Like, for example, it'll tell you the geo coordinates of where the photo was taken. It'll have on there what camera was used, what the date and time that were on there. So all this metadata that actually makes the photo larger, but it's kind of invisible when you're just looking at the photo on the screen. And so the Smush plugin will get rid of that. And so it also does some other things that are way above my head technically, but it will compress the image without losing size. So basically there's something called lossless compression, and that's what you want. And that means it's not going to degrade the quality. And so when you look at it, it looks exactly the same side by side. You won't notice any difference, but one of them is going to be significantly smaller in size. So that right there, the whole point of this is how to speed up your Divi website. Well, if you have a bunch of large images on there and then you compress them, make them smaller, well, your website's going to load faster because it's not needing to load as many large images into the user's browser. And so that right there is one thing that can very, very quickly speed up your website, is if you have a lot of large images and then you compress them, that will automatically make your website faster. So another thing here is image resizing. Now, WP Smush Pro actually has this built in. And so say, for example, you get images from clients and they're all absolutely giant, not just in like the amount of megabytes each image is, but like the width and height. So for example, like, a DSLR camera might output photos at like 5,000 pixels wide. Well, that's way too wide. You will never on web need images that are that giant. And so what you can do is you can set a max width and height, and this is actually a kind of a good guideline to use, because 2048, it's still a pretty big image, but if you have, like, for example, a giant background image and you want it to be like crisp crystal clear, for example, well, you might want it 2,000 pixels wide, but in most cases, you probably don't need images wider than 1,000 or 1,200 pixels wide. And so you can set a max width and height, and then it will automatically resize all the images, which will again make them load faster because they're not as big. And so the cool thing about all of this with WP Smush Pro is it's actually automatic. So once you do it, you can just one click and it'll smush all your images. If you set the resize, once you do that, it'll do that once. But then anytime you upload new photos, it happens automatically in the background without you having to do anything. And so it's truly a set it and forget it type of plugin, and it'll automatically smush those images, resize those images so that your website will load faster. Because what can happen is you can spend time resizing everything, and then you go and get new images from the client, a new blog post or whatever, and then all of a sudden your website's loading really slow again because you've added all these new giant images. And so WP Smush Pro does it for you, not just retroactively to all the images that you already have on your site before installing it, but also moving forward as well, which is very, very important. And so that's why I love the plugin. Another option for WP Smush Pro is Imagify, so another image compression plugin that will speed up your website. Now, Imagify is actually by the same people as WP Rocket. Let's see if they have it on here. WP Media. And so I have not personally used Imagify, but I have close colleagues that have, and they highly recommend it. And so if you don't like WP Rocket, you don't like WP Dev's products and you don't want to use WP Smush, then Imagify might be a good option for you. And so, bottom line is you need some sort of image compression. Now, you might be thinking, well, I manually go and resize images in Photoshop, for example, and you can do that. However, you have to remember to do that every time. What I love about WP Smush Pro is it's set it and forget it. So anytime I add a new image, a new media, it's going to automatically do that. So if I'm writing a blog post and I don't want to take the time to go and compress the image, or I want to see how it looks on the site and I don't want to have to go through the extra steps of compressing the images and resizing it using different tools, you can just upload it and it does it automatically in the background, which is really cool. So that is image compression. So just kind of reviewing here, we're going through how to speed up your Divi website in 5 steps. First step, use great hosting, which is super, super important. It's kind of the backbone of your website and is really the most crucial thing to have a well-running website that loads fast and is reliable. Proper caching, huge. If your website's slowing to a crawl, we'll make sure you have proper caching in place. That's going to be the one thing that's going to help if you're not already using it. And then what we just went through was using compressed images and then making sure that they're properly sized. You can do that in WP Smush Pro. You can do that in Imagify. So super, super valuable there. Now, I asked Lee chimed in the live chat and said he likes the Lightspeed caching plugin. So when we're talking about caching, and I asked them if it is a premium plugin. I'm not sure if he answered me. But yeah, so Lee said he uses WP Rocket too, and it does give good results in GT metrics. However, in his experience, it can slow down the backend sometimes. And if anyone experiences this, disable browser caching. So yeah, I haven't found that, or at least I haven't noticed it. But yeah, that's good to keep in mind. And then Nick mentioned he uses Imagify. Rudolph recommends Short Pixels. I have not used Short Pixels, so I can't recommend it, but Rudolph likes it, so I'm sure it's awesome. Now we're going to go to the next step, number 4 on the list of how to speed up your Divi website, and that is using good plugins and only the plugins that you need. Now this is really important, and so I have my Divi product company, Divi Life, and we do a lot of customer support. Shout out to Carlos, who's here in the live stream. He's one of my support techs. And so as Carlos knows, and as Shafak, my other support tech, knows, when you log into customer sites, a lot of times we'll see like dozens and dozens and dozens of plugins, sometimes 50 plus plugins for a website that does not need 50 plus plugins. And so that's something that is really important and can really slow down your website if you have a lot of plugins. Now, some people will say, okay, well, how many plugins is too many? And there's not a answer to that because every website's different. The answer, or I guess the only answer you can really give is the number of plugins that is too many is any plugins you have that aren't necessary. So, if you have one plugin on there that's unnecessary, well, then that's one plugin too many. And so, because the bottom line is, if your website is running the code, which plugins is just a way it's just a mechanism for adding more code to your website, more functionality. And so the more functionality, the more code that WordPress, the server, has to execute, well then, eventually the slower it's going to get. Now, again, if you're using proper caching and then depending on what the plugin does, it might not come into play. But it's something to keep in mind. The more code, the slower eventually the website will be. And so if you have a e-commerce site, so for example, with DiviLife.com, I think I have like 40-something plugins for everything that I'm doing. It's an e-commerce site, and I have all the e-commerce extensions that go with that. We're selling plugins, so we have a licensing system, so there's stuff that goes into that as well. We have, all the email marketing integrations too. So there's just a lot going on. So, when you have all those different pieces and you put them together, then you end up having a lot of plugins. And so it's like there's a lot, but they're all important and they all serve a very crucial purpose for our business. And so it's not like we can just start deactivating plugins and getting rid of them. And so that's another huge reason why you want really good hosting that can handle using a lot of plugins, having an e-commerce system that has a lot of plugins and stuff. So bottom line is less is more. Only use the number of plugins that you need. One thing I do want to say, though, is some people will say, add functionality into your functions.php file instead of as a plugin so that you'll have one less plugin, and then that'll speed up your site. But code is code. So if your website's executing that code, it's not going to make much of a difference if it's in your functions or as a plugin. And so you don't really need to worry about that. Now, some, commercial plugins will have additional features and different additional settings and stuff that can, kind of bog down the site. And then if you just take simply the functionality that you need and put that in your functions.php file, then yes, that can result in a faster website. But yeah, that's, something is code on your website. So you don't necessarily need to make it into, your functions.php file on your child theme just for that purpose. So, but yeah, so less is more, reputable developers only. So don't use, random plugins from a developer you've never heard of. If it's in the WordPress repository, you'll know that it's safe, but not necessarily that it's been coded super well. And so I know this is kind of a crazy thing to say within WordPress, but I try to use only premium plugins. If it's for one of my business sites or one of my client sites, well, they're paying me money or my websites are making me money. And so I want to invest in something premium to make sure that it's good, to make sure that I'm getting good support. Now, that doesn't automatically mean that just because it's premium, it's going to be good. Because again, you have to make sure it's by reputable developers only. But the problem with free plugins is you might not get support. It'll be really slow, if any. And then another thing too is they're not as motivated to go out and fix bugs when there's not like a monetary component. And so if a new Gutenberg update or a new Divi update breaks something in a free plugin, well, they might, depending on the developer, they might be really quick to fix things. But on a free plugin, they're not getting anything out of it. They might not be as quick. And so that's something to keep in mind too. Is again, there's nothing wrong with free plugins, but sometimes it's worth it to buy something premium so that you can get quicker updates and quicker support. So kind of a side tangent there in regards to plugins in the premium market. But yeah, so less is more, reputable developers only, because a poorly coded plugin can have conflicts with other plugins, can slow down your site. And so using it by reputable developers that are always improving their products and making it as best as possible will ensure that it's going to make your website run smoothly as well and as fast as possible. And then another thing that I highly recommend doing is once a year at minimum, I should probably add at minimum on there, is do a plugin audit. Now, what that means is go into your plugins list, which is a local site, just using one of my child themes. So there's only one active plugin, Smush Pro. But go into the site and look at all the plugins that you have active, because you want to deactivate any plugins that you don't need. So if you're like me and you're, kind of trying out different things to try to get, certain functionality, and, you might deactivate it but not remove it, or maybe you'll forget to deactivate it and you don't really need it. Well, those plugins will stack up over time. And so it's really good to go in and do a plugin audit and look at, okay, am I using this? Or maybe I was using it previously, but now I don't. Like I was using it for a specific campaign or something like that. Or, maybe it's a MailChimp plugin, but now you've switched over to Active Campaign, for example. Okay, well, you can get rid of those plugins that you're now no longer needing. And so another thing, too, is most of the time, deactivating the plugin will completely stop any functionality, any code from running, but not all the time. Some plugins will still be doing something in the background, even if they're not active. It's very rare, but that's something to consider. Just because it's not active on your site doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to be doing something in the background. So I want to point that out as well. Just going to take a second here to look at the chat here, the live chat. So, hey Keith, how's it going? Thanks for joining. So we're talking about 5 ways to speed up your Divi website, as you probably gathered, because this comment looks like it's a little bit old. Okay, so yeah, Lee mentioned the Lightspeed plugin is for free. So Nick asked, what would you suggest for lazy loading JavaScript when being built with Divi? I had a problem with that not too long ago, and that's that relates actually to the caching. We talked about using proper caching, which is a huge way to speed up your Divi website. And so, depending on the plugin, sometimes because all the caching plugins will have different things that you can turn on and off. And so kind of the most basic, right when you install the plugin and just click the basic settings, those are least likely to conflict with anything and cause problems. But if you turn on things like lazy loading JavaScript, it can sometimes, or a lot of times, depending on the plugin, break stuff in the theme. Divi uses a lot of JavaScript for a lot of that front-end functionality. And so sometimes lazy loading it means it's not going to load until you get to the part of the page where it needs to be. And so sometimes that can cause issues because it needs to be loaded right away in order for certain things to happen the correct way. And so I would probably recommend just honestly playing with it, trying to figure out what the right combination of settings is. And then I can't remember if I have lazy loading turned on DiviLife.com, but I'll take a look. But yeah, sometimes it just takes some trial and error and, clearing cache and taking a look with different settings. I don't have a super good answer. Divi has a lot of JavaScript, and so, it might be to the point where you aren't able to lazy load JavaScript. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a super good answer for that. Oh, he said, okay, Nick said, never mind. He meant deferring parsing of JavaScript during initial page load to reduce blocking of page rendering. Yeah, so again, I think it's the same kind of thing is you might just have to play around with it, different things. Now, usually those plugins, when you turn on a setting, you can like exclude certain files or certain things like that. And so you might, again, trial and error, figure out, okay, well, this thing right here, this one JavaScript file in Divi, I need to exclude it, and then that'll make everything work properly. But that's kind of the thing with when you're trying to make a website load as fast as possible and doing all those things, a lot of it is trial and error. When I worked at a software company before I went out on my own to work for myself, one of the tasks, I was in charge of the website and the blog and all of that. And so one of the tasks that my boss had me do was make the website load as fast as possible. And so I was new to that. And so I had to get my hands dirty and just start experimenting, doing research, Googling things, and a lot of it was trial and error. If it's a live site, maybe make a duplicate of a site, do it on staging, or technically staging if you're using things like WP Engine, a host like WP Engine, then they're going to have caching turned off. So you might actually have to duplicate the site, put it on a dev server, make sure it's no index, no crawl, so the search engines won't give you any penalties for having duplicate content. But yeah, experimenting is sometimes just the best way of doing it. So Lee mentioned what cache plugin are you using. I'm not sure if you're talking to me, but I personally use WP Rocket with WP Engine because WP Engine has their server level caching baked into their WordPress install and server configuration. So yeah, moving along, we just went through the fourth way to speed up your website is use good plugins, only the plugins that you need. The fifth way is use a CDN. Now, a CDN stands for Content Delivery Network. And basically what that means is they're going to take parts of your website and distribute them across a network of servers all across the world. And so this is especially important if you get international traffic, people from all over the world visiting your sites, e-commerce, like my website, divilife.com. Using a CDN is important. And so, for example, these two on here, I'll explain the differences, but Max CDN is more of a true CDN, which I just found out they changed the name to StackPath. And so StackPath, they're a true CDN, and so what they'll do is they'll take your images, they'll take, I think, your CSS files and JavaScript files, and they will put them on their servers, duplicate them across all of the different servers in their network, and then anytime a user visits your site, it's going to load those files, because those are the heaviest files, your media files and then your CSS and JavaScript, and then it will load those files from the closest server to where that user is geographically. And so, a lot of your website is still loaded from your normal host, but then those extra things will load quicker because they're not traveling as far geographically. And now, some people think, or some people don't realize that geography does matter with the internet. We think, I have a fast internet connection, I can connect to any website in the world, in seconds, which is true, but geography does matter. There's underwater cables that are carrying data connections across oceans, across continents, and so the farther that your user is from your server, the slower it's going to load for them. Obviously, when you're doing these things we're talking about with caching, good hosting, stuff like that, it's going to load quicker, but using a CDN can make it that much quicker because it's going to load those heavy components that normally take the longest to load for the user. It's going to load them from a server that's much closer to the user, so that overall the website loading process is going to be a lot quicker. So there's two things here. They're similar but different. So MaxCDN, now StackPath is one I just talked about. WP Engine actually has this built in, and so another reason why I love WP Engine is depending on the plan, I think it'll be free for certain plan levels, and so automatically you get StackPath, previously MaxCDN, baked into your hosting plan, which is awesome. And so another reason why having a good premium host like WP Engine is worth its weight in gold. And then if not, you can still use the CDN with any host. And now the second one I have on here is Cloudflare. Now, Cloudflare technically isn't a true CDN. It works a little bit different, but Cloudflare has a lot of extra things built in as well. Has a layer of security, and so I highly recommend using Cloudflare on every website that you build, even for the DNS. The super fast DNS tools that it has, it's worth it. And so I think we'll probably do a live stream specifically on Cloudflare in the future because it's so important. But I highly recommend putting every website you build in Cloudflare, because here's the best part. They have a free plan. And so for $0 a month, you can have the security, the DDoS attack mitigation, the global content delivery network, and then they just have basic level support. So, and then I have Divi Life, I think, on either the Pro or Business plan. I think it's the Pro plan. It adds, some enhanced security tools, and so it sometimes I have to block different IP addresses and stuff like that. So, it's worth the $20 a month for the additional security. So, Cloudflare is awesome. Again, I put every website I build on the free plan. There's no reason not to, because it just adds some additional things that are pretty cool. So those are the ways to speed up your Divi website using a great host. If you're on a cheap host like, I don't want to name drop any bad ones, but we all know who they are. If you're on a really cheap shared hosting and your website doesn't load that great, well, it might be time to upgrade. But even regardless of what hosting company you're using, if you are doing these things on the list, or if you're not doing these things on your list, by doing them, you'll automatically make your website faster. Using proper caching, using compressed images, and making sure the images aren't sized way too big. And then here's the tools we recommend. Using good plugins by reputable developers, and then only the plugins that you need. Doing a plugin audit once a year is a great way to make sure your website's loading as fast as possible. And then the last thing is using a CDN, a content delivery network. Cloudflare, Max CDN. I actually use both because they do things a little bit differently and actually pair really well together. And so I wanted to make that clear. You can use both of these together. Okay, so we are coming towards the end of this live tutorial, Divi live quick tip. And so the last thing I wanted to talk about was a bonus, the last point, which doesn't actually make the front end of your Divi website load faster, but it can make the Visual Builder run smooth, as smooth as possible. And that's really comes into play when you're using the Visual Builder, the front end Visual Builder. That is powerful software. Elegant Themes has done an amazing job building a visual website builder, able to drag and drop margin and padding, and see everything live right there on the screen. Check out yesterday's tutorial we did on 5 ways to speed up your workflow with Divi. And that just kind of gives you a taste of how powerful Divi is. And so it is powerful software that is running right in your browser. And so people don't realize that when you are running something like Divi, Visual Builder in the front end browser, there's things on your end that you need to do for everything to run as smooth as possible. And so everyone, when there's issues with the Visual Builder, is quick to point fingers at Elegant Themes, saying something's wrong with Divi, or they're quick to point fingers at their hosting company, get better hosting. But sometimes you can make the Visual Builder run more smoothly just by things on your end. And so having a computer with significant RAM, now that's a little bit harder to upgrade to buy a whole new machine. But having a computer with good RAM stands for random access memory. It's what makes things run smoothly. And so, it might not be your computer itself that's the problem, but maybe you just have way too many apps open. And so your whole computer is running slow because in addition to running Divi, you have, 35 tabs open, multiple browsers open. You have Photoshop, you have Illustrator, you have your coding, FTP plugin, all these heavyweight apps. And so, it's bogging everything down, and Divi's starting to run slowly, and you're like, well, what's the problem? Well, your RAM has been maxed out. And so that can be something that can make Divi run slowly, which has nothing to do with Divi, nothing to do with your hosting. The next thing is use a modern browser. Don't use Internet Explorer or Edge. Use Chrome, Safari, Firefox. Chrome is probably the best. Safari is I use Safari and Chrome together, and Safari has not been as great the last year or two as it has been previously. But overall, Safari, Chrome, and Firefox are good browsers to use when using the Visual Builder. And then, kind of already mentioned this, but close unnecessary tabs, windows, etc. Chrome, while is a great browser, it is a data hog. It is a RAM hog. And so if you have a lot of windows open on Chrome or a lot of tabs open, if you go into your shoot, what's the name of it? The app that shows everything that's running on your machine. It will, you'll notice that Chrome is using a lot of CPU. And so you can use Chrome with Divi and it works great, but close out stuff you don't need, and I'm guilty of this as anyone. I have, tons of tabs open, multiple browser windows. I use Mac, Apple, and so I have all the different browser spaces open. And so, I have I have my main browser space and have another browser space for this over here for example, for WP Gears, for my core stuff. And so I have all the tabs open there. And so all those things can bog down your entire machine, which is going to make the Visual Builder run slowly. And so that's one of those things that no one really talks about when talking about, Divi not running great, is you need to have a computer with, decent RAM, use a modern browser, close out of unnecessary tabs, windows, apps. I should add apps here as well. And that will make Divi load faster. Now, again, this isn't the front end of your website. This is just something I wanted to talk about when you're building websites and using the Visual Builder. Rudolph mentions using Chrome Incognito. That can be good. It kind of isolates everything. Task Manager. Yeah, that's what I was looking at. Task Manager. I think on Mac it's called something different, but essentially the same thing. It'll show you all the tasks, all the CPU that is being run on your computer, and so you can kind of see what's bogging down your system, and you can close out of those things. So Keith says Chrome only hogs unused RAM. It'll give RAM back if your system needs it. That's a good point. I didn't realize that, but that's good to know for sure. Yeah, that is it. These are 5 ways to instantly speed up your Divi website. If you have other tips, other things that you've done that you think will help, please feel free to share them in the live chat or on the just leave a comment if you're watching the replay. And let me know if you're watching replay or watching live. That definitely helps me kind of track things. I'm going to post the outline here inside the blog post on divilife.com, so you can go back and reference that. Again, let me know if there's something here that is not on the list that you think should be on the list that will help people's Divi websites run faster. I definitely love to add to the list and help as many people as possible make their Divi websites run as smooth and as fast as possible. This was the second Divi Live quick tip. We did one yesterday, trying to figure out kind of a schedule. I'm not sure if it's going to be a daily thing or, once to twice a week, but definitely want to keep doing these. So leave me feedback, leave me, suggestions of things that you'd like to hear me cover, things that maybe you're struggling with, or something that's been annoying you with Divi or whatever. To answer Keith's question, Keith says, love the tutorials. Are you going to be doing these regularly? Yes, absolutely. I'm still trying to figure out the exact schedule. I'd love to say I'm going to do them daily, but that's kind of a huge undertaking, and so I don't want to commit to that yet. So I'm kind of seeing where it goes. Thank you, Carlos, for the love. Appreciate it. So this is the end of today's tutorial. If you jumped in late, you can wait until the live stream kind of finishes up, and then you can go back and watch it from the beginning, and kind of we'll run through all the steps of how to speed up your Divi website. So thank you so much for everyone that joined live. Thank you everyone watching the replay later. Thank you, Lee, for the tips, or for the encouragement on the useful tips. And I will see you guys next time. Take care. Bye-bye.